Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. Remember, you're good-looking because you're always looking for and finding the good. You found good in abundance. You have tuned in to the Neal and Barry Show, or we'll call it Foard and Shore, and you are going to be mesmerized. We're going to use a lot of words today. You're going to be mesmerized. You might be touched. You might be tickled. You might cry. Hopefully, you will be feeling something. That's really what this is about. We want to connect your mind, your brain, and your heart, because that's the longest distance in the world and the shortest distance in the world. And if you can do that with those 18 inches by tuning in and listening to this amazing person named Neal Foard and this interesting guy called Barry Shore, then you'll want to enjoy it, share it, and to make sure you listen to it again. One time is usually not enough when it comes to listening to Neal Foard. So we're just going to jump right in. And those of you who are privileged to watch this, as opposed to just listen, not just listening, as opposed to listening, you'll see a couple of things. Number one, Neal is in his cockpit. He flies a 787, which is a plane that hasn't even been invented yet. And you'll see Barry Shore wearing his classic Canfield shirt. There's a great story that goes with that. And that's really what this is all about. So I'm going to do something uncharacteristic. I'm going to speak for another minute or so, and then I'm going to be quiet and let Neal take over. So I just want to introduce the process of this particular show, podcast, or whatever you want to call it. It's designed for you. That's right. Not Neal, not Barry. Designed for you to have fun. And fun is the ultimate 4-letter FU word. People scratching their head, what are you talking about? Because it's spelled FU capital N capital N. And we'll dive in and talk more about that later in the show. But that's what fun is. The ultimate FU word, 4 letters, FUNN. And with that last N, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Neal, Neal, not the other Neal, Neil. And I'm going to ask Neal to just chime in for a couple of minutes and say who he is and why we're even here, because he might even say, I don't know. Neal, take it away.
All right. Hey, Barry, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure to meet you and to interact with you. And we had such fun last time. And I'm really tickled to be on here for a couple of reasons. The first is how much fun it is to be with you. But the second is that you've gathered together an audience of people that seek out positivity and love and togetherness, and who acknowledge, I think, that, we're not meant to go through this life alone. And because we're not meant to, they're not going to. And they've reached out to a source of joy and upbeat attitude, an attitude where they are grateful to be here, and they're looking for sunlight, and they're looking for positivity in a world that seems quite determined to feed them a side of living that is cynical and distant and negative. And this is the antidote. I'm such a pleasure. I'm so grateful, to be joined with you here today and in general, because there is a poison that is being injected into the system, in that people are trying to persuade you that human beings are awful. And I see this everywhere. I see it in news media, where they're trying to tell you that somebody's out to get them. And when you choose to listen to Barry, when you choose to be here, you're deciding, what, people aren't awful. People can actually, and most of the time, are pretty cool. And the evidence of that is all around you, with little smiles and courtesies like opening a door, or you'll see this at the supermarket. Really small example, but you'll see this, where somebody will have just a couple of items, and then somebody in front of them has a big cart full of stuff. And so they'll turn and see that somebody has only a couple of items. They'll just let them in. And it's the human instinct. And it doesn't make the news. Of course, it doesn't make the news. The reason it doesn't make the news is that it's so common. And the fact that it's so common, and the fact that it doesn't qualify for the news because it's so common, ought to occur to you every time you hear somebody telling you that people are awful or that they're out to get them. I saw this.
Let me put you on pause for a moment, if I may, because we're doing this together. This is jazz riff, baby. This is jazz. You've mentioned the word awful twice. And as you know, because that's why we're here, what we do with Barry Shore and the joy of living is we take everyday words that may seem in the negative and we show you the positive. So awful is a wonderful word, actually. Let's break it up into its two component parts, awe and full. You see, when you get up in the morning and your world, because you invest your first 180 seconds, one of my books, the first 180 seconds, The Big Bang About You, you invest your first 180 seconds in thinking about joy, happiness, peace, and love. You actually use those words. You say the word gratitude like you did. Then guess what happens? Awe enters into your life. AWE. What a fascinating word, Neal. AWE. It could be pronounced awe. Awe. But it's not. It's awe. And the full part is the other part, right? When you are full of awe, then just getting up in the morning, being able to stand, what I call be vertical, and walk, what I call ambulatory, because I can't do that very well. I have to walk in a certain way. Thank God I can now. With the backstory we'll talk about later. But to fill oneself with awe early in the morning is that jet fuel that will enable your rocket to live through the day in joy, happiness, peace, and love. So you're right. We're here to what we call shift. Now, as you know, I've been working with people for more than 4 decades, and 97.2% of people that I've worked with over the decades, for some reason, drop the F in shift, and the other stuff happens. So you're going to be effing careful with your Fs. So you're right. We're here as the antidote to the awful, so that you can really live full of awe. And on that note, I'm going to ask you to share a story, any story. First of all, I love the story about the supermarket, because you're right. When your eyes are open, I'll give you a great line, and then you can think of a story. You ready?
Sure.
There's a famous line that I've, how should we call it? Fixed and reworked. And it goes like this. Oh, what a wondrous web we weave when first we practice to perceive. Because there is another one out there that goes the other way. But oh, what a wondrous web we weave when first we practice to perceive, to be able to see. You're in the other aisle, and what you just saw was what Neal just painted, that the person with lots of stuff looks behind and sees a person with 3 or 4 items, says, oh, please go. And you saw it. It was meant for you to see, to perceive that the world is filled with awe. So just share any story that comes to mind. Wonderful, Neal.
Well, I got quite a few that would relate to what you're talking about. I'll tell a quick story about my brother-in-law, Mike, who is an engineer by training and trade. And he's a project manager, and he deals with very, very big technical and technological advancements. And what Mike is so very good at is he's a gifted engineer. He can really figure out how to fix anything pretty much. But what makes him special is that Mike is a human being first, and he's really, really good at managing extremely bright people who are perhaps socially awkward or not very good at communication. And so he unlocks for brilliant engineers, he unlocks and protects their skills from meddling or poor management, or, he's really the wonderful person that has the capacity to understand both sides of an argument, if you will, both sides of life, the forward and the backward, and so forth. And one the interesting story was there was a very famous case of an engineer at Hewlett-Packard who was very gifted, but he was prickly, and he didn't like most people. And the management found him very difficult to get along with. He would say, for example, they would give him an assignment, and the parameters of the assignment would be, Rick, we would expect you to make the following modifications to this technology. And he is, having understood the assignment very quickly, he can understand by the way they ask it that they don't understand what they're asking. And so his response is likely to be, that's stupid. Okay. Now, under normal circumstances, they would just kick somebody like this out of the company because they're so difficult to deal with. They're nothing but a drag on the system. But his level of genius was such that if you could just manage to get through the brambles, you're likely to find gold in there. Well, as it turns out, one of the project managers, and this would have been a very Mike thing to do, one of the project managers noticed that Rick always had lunch with the same person every day. And the person was a part of the cleaning crew. And for whatever reason, Rick liked them. This project manager said, I wonder if I could get the cleaning guy to ask Rick to do this. Maybe he's got a magic way of getting Rick to do it. And he won't take any offense if the idea is stupid. Rick will just fix it and tell him how to do it the right way. So they made this cleaning crew guy the vice president of Rick. And they started just giving him the assignments. And it drastically increased the efficiency of the operation. A, because nobody ever had to be on the receiving end of Rick's negativity. And B, because the assignments got done. And then C, and this is my favorite part of the story, is imagine how you feel if you're vice president of Rick. You're part of the cleaning crew, but you become a vital part of this organization. Vital in the sense that it's a little more high profile. A cleaning crew's work is vital, or they wouldn't have them do it. But it's just that it took on a new dimension because why? Why was he Vice President Rick? Because he understood. Because he was gracious enough to absorb whatever prickliness that Rick had to give. And he was sweethearted enough to let it happen and to understand Rick. So let's go back to your original premise about getting up in the morning with a sense of awe and fullness. This vice president of Rick, it wasn't about him. He was willing to absorb whatever else, or for all, I don't know what they talked about. And I don't know whether they were spending the day talking smack about other people. I don't know. All I know is that Rick found him good company. And I have a suggestion that I'm trying to actually enforce in my own life. And it goes back to what you were saying about how you wake up. It's, when you go through life and you think to yourself, this is about me, then what happens is all the little slights and all the little things that don't go right really bother you. But if, as an alternative, you wake up with a sense of, okay, today isn't about me. Suppose today was about me my mission is to find somebody else who needs a little graciousness and extra care. Then when you're in the line at the supermarket, you don't happen to notice the person who has a fewer items. You're looking for somebody who has fewer items. You are looking for somebody in the Home Depot who seems lost or confused. You are looking for somebody in the parking lot who's having trouble pulling their car out because nobody will stop, and you become the person who stops. And when you go in search of, if I accept that there will be at least one person today that I'm going to run into that needs gratitude or grace or help, you're going to take on a very different response to negativity. I'll give you an example.
Before you give an example, write it down. Remember your example.
Well, I already know because it's the vice president of Rick went into the day thinking, this isn't about me. This is about Rick. This is about unlocking Rick.
So I want to unlock some of the things you mentioned because I've written them down. And some of these things, I'm telling you, wonderful Neal, this is the reason we're together. We're doing this. And if we're not touching people with this, hello, everybody, wake up. This is fabulous. I'm going to unpack a few things going back to Mike. First of all, I love Mike. You know why? Because he's the essence of the word he. H-E. You know, people talk about pronouns these days. Well, this is Mike. Mike's pronoun is he. You know why?
Why?
Human first, then engineer. Human, engineer.
It's a magical blend, that's for sure.
That's right. So that's a magical blend. You mentioned something, again, because you're a wordsmith and you do it so wonderfully because it flows, that when you talked about the person before you introduced his name, you said he was prickly. Now, when I think of prickly, the first thing I think of is prickly pear, because I like the alliteration, prickly pear. And then you think, of course, of a cactus, right? That's a prickly pear cactus. But when you said the name Rick, guess what, Neal? What jumped out? The word prickly. What's the essence of the word prickly? Is R-I-C-K, Rick. So even if his name wasn't Rick and you made it up, it fit perfectly. Now, everybody knows, of course, the first part of the word prickly, if you leave out the L-Y. So we'll just be careful with that for the moment. But that Rick came after. First, you said he's prickly. Then his name is Rick. But it had to be because it's in the word prickly. It came from the very being. And then when you told me, or you told us, that Rick was a drag on the system. Remember those words?
Mm-hmm.
He was a drag on the system. Well, guess what? I wrote it down. You know why? Because instead of putting a space between drag on, he was the dragon of the system.
Wow.
Is that right? And by the way,
I love that insight because, in fact, that's why they kept him, is because he was such a powerful life force in his way.
And that's the point. Dragons are powerful.
Dragon energy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful? So he was the drag on the system. What happened is the VP of Rick was able to combine those two words and enable Rick to become the dragon of the system and utilize his. But I love that idea. That, see, when people think for solution, and they say, okay, we have an issue or a problem, we'll call it, but let's think for solution, and noticing, and now we're having a VP of Rick, which enabled Rick to do something that he wasn't doing, which, like you said, you get up in the morning and it's Rick, prickly Rick. But if you get up in the morning, it's not about me. Now, me is a wonderful word. Everybody knows the word me, right? I heard this from a remarkably gifted teacher, guru. She told this to me, I'd say 57 years ago. I was probably 17 or 18. She said the word me has two components. The E stands for energy, just like E equals MC squared. You know, there's an E and an M in MC squared. And she pointed out. So energy is the essence of life. That's what you're about. That's what you talk. That's what your stories are about. It's Mike. The M stands for manipulating or manipulation. Now, unfortunately, manipulation gets a bad rap these days, right? But if you understand what it means when you manipulate energy for the positive, the purposeful, the powerful, the pleasant, then you do what you said. Your eyes are open. Your reticular activator, everybody look that up. Your reticular activator is alive. It's like a beam coming out from your mind. And everything about you is focused on what can I do to be of service? That's what you've done with that wonderful story, starting with Mike. And Mike, of course, M-I-K-E. Mike was the other version of Rick, but Rick was prickly. Well, you can't make a better story, Neal. Now, what was your example?
I want to talk more about my brother-in-law, Mike, because I got really lucky. I married an absolutely wonderful woman whom I've been in love with for 33 years. And but I'll tell you why I lucked out so much wasn't just her. It was her beautiful family. She had this marvelous family, the Kapuscinskis. They went by Cap. And they're the patriarch of the family, Joe Cap, was just such a wonderful, sunny, lovely, funny. He was a lot like you, Barry. He had a lot of energy to give to the world, and he raised these wonderful children with his beautiful wife. And Joe Cap gave Mike a sense of playfulness and grace and generosity. So Mike Cap, one of my brother-in-laws, we were at a mini mart. We were on our way to the batting cages with a couple of friends of Mike's, and we were at this mini mart. We were just there to get some bottled water. And as it happens in the parking lot, there were these two gals. They looked like they were about 20, 21. They were trying to fix a flat on their little Nissan. And the car hadn't been jacked up, and it was on kind of an unlevel plot of ground, but they already had 3 bolts off one of these wheels. Okay. And Mike's like, whoa. So now it's one thing if Mike went over and fixed the flat, and that happens all the time. You'll see this again and again. Human beings are like that. They'll go and they'll help out and fix. They'll push a car out of traffic, and they'll catch a stray dog. And, people are like that. But that isn't Mike's style. It isn't that he wants to save you today. He wants to save you forever. So he decided, listen, if you're game, I'm going to teach you how to do this the right way. I'm going to teach you gals how to fix this flat. Now, I should caution right away that Mike he's not a mansplainer. Okay. He never condescends when he passes on information, and he never assumes that you're stupid or that you don't know. It starts out with, let me just add a little extra muscle to this, maybe help you get this spare out of the trunk. But, and when he susses it all out, he goes, listen, can I give you some tips on how to do this the correct way? First of all, let's find a nice level patch on which to do this. Because if you're on an uneven ground and you jack this thing up, the car could pitch over with you under it. So we don't want to do that. So he gave them a gold-plated tutorial on how to fix a flat, and included all of the little tricks on how to get a tire out of the trunk when you're not maybe muscle bound.
Excuse me, give us one. How do you do that?
Well, he always keeps a piece of PVC pipe in his trunk, but in this case, he uses the tire iron to lever the tire up in such a way that you can, instead of pulling it out, you actually push it so that it will be upright, so that it'll be rollable. And then you use whatever lever you might have, whether it's the tire iron, the lug, wrench or whatever, to jack it up over the lip. So another part of this.
I need to put you on pause for a moment, because that image, again, if you're watching this, it's even better for you. But if you're listening to it, it's wonderful, because who hasn't experienced the necessity of removing a spare from a trunk? And you're right. If it's flat, then the way you're going to do it is, in quotation marks, the dumb way. You're going to lift it up with your back, and you're going to strain yourself because you think you just got to pull it up. But if you use Archimedes' principle, and look at Archimedes, everybody look it up, Archimedes, Archimedes. He had this great line, give me a lever and a fulcrum and I'll move the world.
Yeah.
So you're telling us that Mike was giving over Archimedes' principles to these wonderful young beings who were just watching in awe. They were full of awe. And Mike was helping, and he may even ask, not that he took the spare out, he may have done it in such a way where they could see, oh, I could do that because now it's easily accessible.
Well, he also had them do it. So
that's the best way to teach.
Yeah, exactly. You got to do it for yourself to really understand anything. But I'll give you one extra piece of the story, which is kind of marvelous. And that is that we were on our way to the batting cages. We never did go to the batting cages because in the midst of helping them fix the car, he could see that they were unprepared for roadside trouble, because they didn't have like a kit with flares or anything like that. So he put together a little list of things that they would need for this roadside kit. The the flares and he gave him a piece of PVC pipe and so forth. Was like, where did he get all this? Well, he sent me to go get it. So while they're,
by the way, you did willingly.
oh, of course, I'll do
Yeah,
it.
no, I'm saying this is an important part of the flow.
Yeah. No. So, I mean, what happened was we pivoted. The whole day was a big pivot because as soon, and not every member of our little tribe there was keen on helping two gals fix a flat and then giving them a tutorial on how to do this in the future. Like they wanted to go to the batting cages, but I'm sorry, but here's what turned the trick. Anytime Mike encounters a willing student, then he's all in. And the younger of the two gals was, you could tell she really did think, oh yeah, we really should know how to do this. We were stuck until we were kind of freelancing until Mike came along. So he had me go off to, there was like what was it? There was like a Murphy's Auto Supply or something, that wasn't far away. So he put me in the car and sent me over there to go get this stuff. And part of the story is his list was absurdly great. So it had in it, like, for example, reflective vests and hand cleaner, right, for after handling the tire. And he said to them, listen, part of the reason you wear the vest isn't just so that people will see you. It's so you can keep the dirt off your clothes. So
wait a minute. I love the insight because this is the genius of teaching.
Yeah.
See, and I'm going to interrupt. I'm putting you in. I'm doing interruptus now. This is right. Neal is interruptus, or maybe it's Barry interruptus. By the way, for the Catholics in the audience, you get the understanding. It's because it's so vital what you're saying here. The ability to make sure that somebody understands the most frequently listened to radio frequency in the world is WII-FM. Every human being on the planet, 8+ billion people, are tuned in to WII-FM every single day. WII-FM stands for What's in It for Me. Mike intuitively understood, and maybe also because he is a master teacher in the sense that he relates with people, that by sharing with them that the vest is not just, or the reflective vest, not just so that others will see you. Oh, wait a minute. What's in it for me? My benefit? It will keep your clothes clean. You won't get dirt on you. So it went deep into their being. It was masterful what he said. That was the genius. I'm watching this unfold, by the way, as you're saying it. That's why you're so good at what you do. I'm watching this unfold. I'm watching you go to the store, get this list of stuff, scratching your heads. Who's going to pay for this? Okay, forget it, whatever it is.
Yeah, no, that was, we paid for that for sure.
Yeah, of course. But the point is that you literally saved the lives of two humans who were full of awe after this event, because they'll never forget it, and they'll discuss it, and they'll talk about it, and it's a pivot in their lives. And as you said, you went from pivot. Now it's interesting because there's another word, the P and D are very closely related. It's actually not easy using words that have D's in them or P's in them. And you went from, the other part of the group was sort of in a divot. If you play golf at all, you know what a divot is. They weren't in the groove yet. For them, it was a divot. And for Mike and you, became a pivot. And that's beautiful.
Divot. I'll finish this story out with something that was my observation. Okay?
Please.
I don't know whether Mike ever, I don't know whether he regarded it as saving anybody's life. I don't think that it wasn't so much that. He just felt like, look, it'll be better if you know these things. Okay. And you'll have a toolkit. So in case you run into more trouble, like a couple of flats. But the sort of moment of truth for me was like this. So as I said before, one of the guys was kind of impatient to get to the batting cages. And by the time we'd gone off and done the whole errand, at Murphy's, and and then kitted them up and gave them the whole education on how to fix the flat. I mean, it was, we'd killed an hour and a half. So the batting cages weren't on. So we get back in the car, and Mr. Pissy says, well, Uncle Mike saving the world one flat tire at a time. And he said it as a kind of like, jerk. And just at that moment, up come the girls in their car, and the older of the two rolls down the window, and she looks at Mike and she says, hey, thanks, man. You're a good dude. And then they, drive off. Now, what I got from that was this. If you could have seen her expression on her face, it was surprise. She was surprised that somebody had taken all that time and gone out of their way and paid for the PVC pipe and the hand cleaner and the vests and the flares and the little triangle, and the PVC pipe was the genius because we put a piece of rebar in it. So essentially it's Archimedes' lever, right? So he put a lever in their car so they could jack the items up and so forth. Anyway, but that surprise was coupled with a kind of, yeah, but you know what? That's how people are, And so what he had done with this gesture was the older of the two was reminded, you know what? There are good men out there. They're not all jerks. And the guy in the back seat who had said, oh, saving the world one life at a time, he was chastened in that very second, which is, no, this was an important day for a bunch of people.
Whoa! First of all, Neal is so expressive. He used an amazing word, chastened. And again, look it up, Chastened, to be chastened. Chastened, what a great word, Neal. And on that note, this high note, we're going to do a very brief commercial break. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Don't go away, because you just need to hear more of Neal and Barry on the Neal and Barry Show. It's Foard and Shore. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Hang on, because you're about to take off in the rocket. Be right back after this brief message. Opportunity, what an opportunity. I'm going to use 2 4-letter words right now. Free gift. Free gift. Yes, you can have a copy of my best-selling book, The Joy of Living, How to Slay Stress and Be Happy, the ebook version for absolutely free. All you have to do is send an email to me, Barry, Barry, at barryshore.com, and in the heading, the subject line, just write free gift. It's as easy as that. This is a life-changing, life-enhancing opportunity. Barry at barryshore.com. You'll be glad you did. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Free gift. Do it now. Take the action. Make it happen right now. Best wishes. Bye. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved immortal beings, and good-looking people. Remember, you're good-looking, you're always looking for and finding the good. Our cup runneth over with good. This is the Neal and Barry Show, Neal and Barry podcast, Neal and Barry stage, whatever you want to call it, but it's Foard and Shore, and you are in the groove now, hearing stories about people who are full of awe. That's right. It's the opposite of awful, or actually it's the understanding of awful. And we're going to just have a few more minutes together, and we're going to rock and roll, because this is a jazz riff. By the way, I just want to make mention to everybody that Neal is a porn star. If you didn't know before, I'm giving you insight into his background. He's a porn star. One of the most famous porn stars in the world. People, I hope, are scratching their heads or looking at him saying, what are you talking about, Barry? What's a porn star? Well, it stands for Power of Related Narrative, Storytelling, Arousing Response. And if you didn't listen to the first half hour, well, you can do a little bit now, because you heard in the back seat about the fellow who was chastened because there was a response to the story. And everybody involved in that particular story, and the story of Mike, and the story of Mike's father, Joe, is all about that continuation of flow in the world. And flow is just such a fabulous piece of you, because let's be blunt, everybody knows intellectually that we're all 75, 77% water, right? Water, blood, all that, there's liquid in you. Well, guess what, everybody? If the liquid is not flowing inside of you, you're not alive anymore. So you want to keep that flow going. You might say, well, that's automatic. Well, yeah, you know something? It is. But when you listen to Neal and Barry and you are touched by stories, because he's a porn star, remember that, you're touched by stories, your flow becomes even more. And I want to share with you something now that's going to tickle you, Neal, and hopefully allow you to get a couple more stories in. And I'm going to talk to you about this idea of flow. So you ready? So let's use the letter O. O. And you put an L in front of it. Now, how do you pronounce L-O?
Low.
Low. Now put a W on the other end. How do you pronounce that?
Low.
Low. So first one is low, as lo and behold. Second one is low. Now let's put an F in front of the L. What do you have?
Flow.
Flow. Now, interestingly enough, what if you add an E and an R at the other end after the W? How do you pronounce that?
Flower.
Oh, what's the matter with you, baby? Because really, everybody listening, and there are hundreds of thousands of you, and I urge everybody to share this with at least 5 people, so there'll be millions of you. It should be flower.
Flower.
And guess what? When you walk into a garden, and especially for me, I happen to really enjoy 3 kinds of flowers. One is a sunflower. Another is roses. Who doesn't like roses? And dandelions. I enjoy dandelions a lot. But if you look and your eyes are open and your ears are open and you feel what we just talked about, you will point to them from your friends or for yourself saying, wow, look at those flowers. And you know why they are? Because if you were looking inside, just like you look inside of you, it's all about what's happening in there. There's energy flowing. It may be called sap. It may be called, I don't know what the botanical words are for it, but they are connected to the ground, and they have nutrients, and they have sunlight, they have water, and they are flowing. So they're really flowers. And when you begin to look at the world that way and think of the world that way and feel the world that way, then guess what? You understand that you're a flower, and others are as well. And the garden of life comes alive for you. So that's your jumping off point, Neal, because you're the porn star. I have a story about the garden of life.
Well, so you're making me think of a lot of things. The first thing I want to make a comment on is the porn star business. I'm going to grab that piece of audio, turn it into a little clip, and I'm just going to share it with my wife. Second, which magnificent. If anybody asks me, like, so what's your background? Oh, I'm a porn star. Barry says so. Anyway, the second thing is, let's think about that flower thing. That's the first time I've heard that. That's brilliant. When you consider what is the role of a flower on both the plant and in the ecosystem, a flower in this case, it is the part of the plant that is meant to help it reproduce. And so it's the immortality system, if you will. It's the permanent and ever-flowing energy of that plant. But let's look at it another way. The plant cannot reproduce unless a honeybee or some other mechanism spreads that pollen. So what it's doing is it's offering the pollen to the ecosystem. And it's part of a chain of giving. And in that sense, I think that your choice of flower, its energy is flowing into the system. It's giving as much as it is receiving. That's a really, really nice example to us as human beings. As I was saying before, if you got up and you said to yourself, my mission today is to find that person who needs a little grace and can use a tiny favor, a smile, if that's all it is, Um, and imagine how different your approach is. You know, you become a flower. You're trying to flow energy into the system, not take. This isn't about you getting one further up in the line at the grocery store. This is about you giving somebody else that space, provided nobody, isn't a long line of people behind you that's going, "Hey, no cuts." But but I want to go to let's stay on the flower thing, and because I have to confess that what I thought of when you said that rephrase of it was my other brother-in-law, Dave, also my wife's brother, and what Dave has is a kind of natural vibe to the world that everything's going to be cool. He's in the music business for years and years and years. He was working for Rhino Records, and Rhino lately has become famous for sort of repackaging one-time big artists and then relaunching their material. And I just love that role, because what he does is he reinvigorates and reintroduces stuff that's had sort of disappeared. And here's why that's so, well, I mean, there's a number of reasons why it's so wonderful. Here's what I love about it. Oftentimes, the greatness of something that somebody artistically has put into the world, it's temporary and it's thrilling when it first shows up. But there's a whole group of people that have never had the benefit of seeing it. And Dave's job is to reintroduce it to a whole new audience of people. And that's just so him, that because that's he's all about sharing. Right? I want to share this with you. He's such a gracious husband and a good hombre and a wonderful brother. He's got a sweet nature. And like any family, the three children were all very different. Dave is the engineer, and excuse me, Dave is
Mike is the engineer. Dave is the musician.
Dave the musician and the music lover. And Marianne, my spouse, she's that wonderful mix of strength and sweetness. Well, I'll tell you a story about my wife, Marianne. She worked at Toyota, and I was working for the ad agency that was working on behalf of Toyota. And she's quite a striking person. She has quite a nice figure. And, when she was in her 20s and late 20s and working at Toyota, this would have been back in the 80s or early 90s. So what happened was that, we didn't live back then in the sort of cultural understanding that we live in now. And it was quite frequent that men would make remarks about a woman's figure. So I'm on one side of a bank of cubicles and she's on the other side, but I recognize the walk. You know how that is, Barry. You can yes. tell somebody just by the way they walk. Mm-hmm. And so I knew she was over there. And as she walked by, there was another guy on the other side of that. And for the sake of argument, we'll call him Robert. And I hear her coming and I hear her going. And as she passes, this guy said, "That was as good going away as it was coming towards me." Okay. Now, there's all kinds of ways you could deal with that. Right. But I heard her stop. And she turns and she comes back and she says, "Robert, that was beneath you." And then she walked away.
Wait a minute. I want you to repeat it because it was such a brilliant moment.
Oh,
Can you say that again?
"Robert, that was beneath you." And so look at the jujitsu and the power of what happened there. Now, she didn't slap his face. She didn't call him a jerk. What she did was she set an expectation for him. She said, essentially, look at all of the subtext. Like, if you said that with a lot more words, here's how it goes. "Robert, I find that remark offensive. And don't do that. And what's more, I'm surprised it came from you because I think of you as a better man than that." Okay. So all of that was said in that remark, but there was one extra little part of it, which is she is reflecting strength. She is not saying, I'm a victim here and I found that offensive. She's not taking an offended mindset. She's taking a strong mindset, which is, Robert, we're all part of the same team here. Don't make that kind of remark. You don't know what kind of reaction that produces, what kind of mental state. You see what I mean? In other words, it's a strong response. It's actually a gracious response. It's
That's the point. Yes.
It's a teammate's response. In the Boy Scouts, they have this marvelous oath. And a scout is trustworthy, loyal, friendly, helpful, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. All right. Now, the part there is courteous. He wasn't being courteous. He wasn't being kind. And she wasn't saying, you're a jerk. She was doing the opposite. She was saying, you are better than that. So, Robert, be courteous and kind, and be loyal to the organization, and be friendly to me. And that was not friendly. That was. So you can see how it contained all of that energy in that small remark. And my admiration for my wife is that she is that person. She has equal parts strength and grace, understanding, and yet she won't accept that kind of treatment. And I think there's a wonderful lesson there.
I want to unpack a few things here because I am deeply moved by that. First of all, a big bravo to Joe Cap. Yay, Joe.
Yeah.
Yay, Joe. For being the father that channeled the flow of the energy that enabled these three wonderful beings to pursue the best in them. The human engineer,
their mother, Mary Ann Cap, as well.
The mother as well, Dave, and the ability to share. And share, by the way, stands for spreading happiness and rejuvenating energy. That's what Dave does.
That's very much him. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly
and now
right.
Mary Ann. And I'm going to say two pieces, maybe three. One is that you're right. She used jujitsu, as you said, which essentially is the ability to use the other person's energy against them in a positive way, so that they become aware, because it's really not about beating your opponent, which is what you said, is Mary Ann was so smart. It's about enabling your opponent to become aware of the world, to be full of awe, and therefore, yes, I wouldn't want to, that's not me, that's beneath me. But here's the best part of all, when you tell the story. You ready for this?
Mm.
It's why you fell in love with your wife. You became enamored. You became love-filled, and you needed to be with this amazing being named Mary Ann. That's how powerful that statement was. So if it wasn't that, if Robert had not created the opportunity for Mary Ann to help him, and therefore allow you to feel that this is the being I need to be with for the rest of my life. That was just so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Porn star.
I have to confess that at the time when it happened, my reaction was entirely selfish, which is that I was on the other side of the wall and I didn't say anything, but my reaction was like, it was like, score. Not even realizing, not unpacking the full importance and significance of what had taken place. I do not know for a fact what the emotional reaction of this guy was on the other side, but my suspicion is that he thought about it for a long time. And there's this phenomenon, which you no doubt know, which is the Pygmalion effect. And the Pygmalion effect is that people will live up to your expectations for them. And so, for example, when you set an expectation for a soldier that he is going to behave at a very high level of civilized behavior, and he's going to raise his game to be physically fit and
mentally alert and spiritually involved.
Right. When you set that expectation for a soldier, they will live up to it. They will take their pride in living up to that expectation. If an officer sets the wrong expectation, that we are a marauding band of looters, the soldiers will live up to that expectation as well. The same is true of sportsmen, athletes. It's true of police officers. It's true of anybody in a corporation. People will live up to the expectation set by leadership. And in a family, children will live up to the expectations of their parents. Often there's, quite a lot of Sturm und Drang and problems with that. But
by the way, that's storm and whatever else it was. Sturm und Drang, storm and drama, we'll call it.
Yeah, there you go.
Storm and drama in a family.
Yeah, lots of angst and problems. But let's think of it in this form, that in the Pygmalion effect, if you set an expectation for someone that you expect that they are a fine person, they will most of the time try to do that. They will try to be that. And think again about going into the world with a mission that today I'm going to be on the lookout for somebody who needs a little extra boost, an energy or a small favor, or at a minimum, some courtesy. If I go out into the world and I do that, what you're actually doing is you're setting an expectation for whoever you encounter that that's how people are. And then they live up to that. So these small gestures of gold. Let's go back to the car, and Mike does this. There's 2 gallons of solid, and he teaches them the correct way and kits them out with an emergency roadside kit. And then the older of the two, the reaction is, "Thanks, man. You're a good dude." Okay, so she now goes into the world thinking that's how good people are.
That's the good dude that I want to be with in life. I love it.
Right. And so what happens is she's setting an expectation for her own behavior, which is, I'm going to be a good dude today.
Or a dudess.
Yeah. And so let's go with the countervailing thing. Let's suppose that you are a very highly paid pundit on a TV show, and all you do all day is try to set people off against one another. That all what you're making your money from is being a kind of prickly, angry person who is spreading the sense that everybody's out to get you. Well, you're setting an expectation among the people that receive that message that everybody's out to get them. So I might as well get the first lick in. You're spreading.
You're spreading the poison. On that note, we'll call it a half note, maybe even a quarter note, but it's a bomb. I'm going to say the following. Thank you for everybody that's watching and listening. And I am sure, because my name is Barry Shore, S-H-O-R-E, but you can pronounce it that way, Shore, S-U-R-E, that you are feeling the power, the purpose, the pleasantness, the positivity that is happening here. And by the way, this is just Neal and Barry. We don't rehearse, we just talk. And that's for your benefit, because everything we do in our lives is reflective of who we are. He's a porn star. I'm the ambassador of joy. And you're the one that makes a difference in the world. You're a cog. I'm going to, COG is a great acronym that Neal just taught us. Ready? It's called the chain of giving. You mentioned it in the flower situation, which is really a flower. The chain of giving. And when he talks about the Pygmalion effect, for those of you who don't know how to spell it, because most people will spell it P-I-G-M-A-L-O-N, it's Pygmalion, P-Y-G-M-A-L-I-O-N. Malion. Look it up. Look up Archimedes. Look up flower, and don't pronounce it flower. I mean, you can for once in a while, but start thinking that way. And this is the first of our series, even though I don't want to say it's the first, because when we have 100 under our belt, we won't say it's this the 100. Maybe at the 100th we will. But you have encountered today Neal and Barry in our essence. He plays the, what does he play? He plays a guitar. He plays a trumpet. Barry plays the heart and the mind. And we together create a wonderful flow that is just here for you. That's the only reason we're doing this. We're here to serve. We call it SOS. Some people call it the shiny object syndrome, which distracts. No, we're involved in attraction. And SOS stands for service over self. Wonderful, Neal. It's hard for me to say these words, but our time at the moment for this particular session is coming to a close. But the genius of it is that we're going to do more. And for those of you who are watching, you're seeing Neal in his cockpit. And as I said, he's a porn star. Oh, but we won't go there. His professional stuff. And you see Barry in his Canfield shirt, and we'll talk about that maybe the next time we're together. But stay tuned, because there's more of this goodness coming. We're going to talk about grace again. We talk about share. We'll mention Boy Scouts. And Neal stands for NEAL, never-ending awareness, lovingly. That's what he's all about. So we have another, remember everybody, the ultimate four-letter FU word is fun. FUNN. So after the show, people ask you, well, what are you doing? So you point your finger at them and say, hey, everybody, FU. But remember to add right away, capital N, capital N. Where'd you get that? I said, well, I listen to Neal and Barry wants to teach the world to FU. Capital N, capital N. You get their attention. You can talk about flowers. You can talk about Sherry. You can talk about Mike and Dave and Neal and Barry and Marianne. Hello. Stories that touch you and arouse response. So Neal, you got 37 seconds, kid, to just say anything you want as a wrap up of how much you would enjoy doing this.
Well, I do enjoy it, Barry. You're always so positive. I leave feeling better. I want to just use this last opportunity to just say this. The number one rule that I'm trying to live by now is leave things better than you found them. And that's all I want to do now. I just want to leave things better than I found them. And in that sense, I'm really quite an admirer of yours, because it's either on purpose or by accident. That seems to be how you always leave me. You always leave me better than you found me, because I'm filled with more energy and more optimism. I'm more determined to go out there in the world and remind people that they're not alone. And that seems like that's a pretty good investment on my part, is to spend time around folks like you that make me want to remind people they're not alone.
Let's use that as a jumping off point next time, because that is the line that my father lived by and taught me. He used words, but he also did it more by showing. So this is too wonderful. It's by design. It's so fabulous. So as we like to do, we're going to do a big hug of hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and then you can share the hug with others throughout the day. And remember, hug stands for heartfelt, unlimited giving. And so on the count of three, wonderful Neal, ready? 1, 2, 3. And our blessing to everybody is go forth, live exuberantly, spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. See you all again soon. Best wishes. Bye now.